Hello and welcome to this English lesson about kitchen action verbs. Now, I did do an English lesson about the kitchen a while ago. It was a popular lesson. In this lesson, though, I'll look at specifically the verbs we use to talk about the things you do in the kitchen. Now, if you're someone who doesn't cook or bake, you should still watch this lesson. I will be using a lot of very common English verbs, a lot of common English words that we use when we're talking about things we do in the kitchen. This isn't just a lesson for cooks and bakers and people who love preparing food. This is a lesson for everyone who has ever gone to the kitchen to get a snack, who has ever looked in the fridge for something to eat late at night. So once again, welcome to this English lesson about kitchen action verbs. I think you'll enjoy it. Slice. So when you slice something, you need a knife, and you use the knife to make relatively equal size pieces. So this person is slicing a watermelon. They decided they needed a knife because they were going to slice a watermelon. They would use it to make those things, which are called slices, by the way. So you can eat a slice of watermelon. The most common use of this verb is probably when you talk about bread. You buy bread and then you slice bread with a knife. And then the piece that comes off is called a slice. So another one of those English words that works as a verb, to slice, and as a noun. That was last week's lesson. Not all of these work this way. Dice. So when you dice something, it's usually a vegetable. And when you dice it, if you look closely, the person is making tiny little cubes out of it. Or I was going to say squares, but technically they are cubes. So when you dice something, it's usually something like carrots. It might be something like celery. You're trying to make really small, uniform size pieces or cubes. Usually you dice carrots before you put them into boiling water to make soup. But yes, often you will dice something. Sometimes we dice our potatoes into really small cubes before we put them into soup or something like that. And then there's just the general verb cut. When you cut something, you get a knife and you make it into smaller pieces. There's no other real way to describe it. Again, cut is the general term for anything you do with a knife. So slice and dice, and I'll talk about chop in a minute, are all a little more specific, but you can use the word cut for almost anything you do with food with a knife. You're going to cut up some vegetables. You're going to cut up some fruit. Notice I put up there. I'm turning it to a phrasal verb. But cut is just, the generic or most used version of it. And then we have chop. So when you chop something, it just means to cut it into pieces. And it's not like slice, where when you slice, you get a slice, or dice. When you dice, you get cubes. When you chop, you're just cutting it up into smaller pieces. So you can chop some carrots. You can chop up some celery. I think we do often add the word up to it. I'm going to chop up some carrots, chop up some celery, and start to make soup. If you make pancakes or anything else in a frying pan, at some point you will need to flip the pancake. You cook one side, and when that side is done, when it has turned brown a little bit, you flip what's in the frying pan or on the griddle. These are pancakes, a fairly common breakfast food. I shouldn't say that. It's more like a weekend breakfast food. Oh, let's make pancakes. But you need a spatula, what I also call an egg flipper, but the real word is spatula, and you would use the spatula to flip whatever you have. If you fry an egg, at some point you need to flip the egg so the other side will cook as well. And then if you have ever made bread, part of the bread making process is that you need to knead the dough. I just used two different English words there. You need, N-E-E-D, like you have to knead the dough. So this is when you work the dough with your hands in order to kind of stretch out the flour in the dough. It's important to knead the dough because it creates a better bread at the end. So if you've ever made bread or any kind of pizza dough or cinnamon rolls, at a certain point you need to knead the dough. There I am using both words again. Definitely when you are making bread, you would knead the dough. And if you've ever eaten cheese, you probably have used a grater to grate the cheese. So the tool is called a grater, a cheese grater, and you use it to grate the cheese. You run the cheese over the grater and it makes little tiny pieces of cheese. You can see them falling out the bottom. It's very common when we make pizza, we will grate the cheese and then we'll put grated cheese on the pizza. Notice I'm using the verb grate and I'm using it to describe the cheese as well as the tool. So you grate the cheese with a grater and then you put the grated cheese on the pizza. And it does soften to a D sound. Did you hear that? Grated cheese, grated cheese. It's a little bit of a T sound as well as a D sound. If you have ever eaten potatoes or carrots or a banana, one of the things you will need to do is you will need to peel it. So you get a potato peeler or a knife and you use it to peel your potatoes. The skin of the potato is not yummy. In fact, I don't really like potato skins. Some places people do eat the skin. If you have a baked potato, often the skin will still be on it, but sometimes the potato peel or the skin. We use both words, by the way. I think we call it a potato peel before it's cooked, but if you cook it, it's a potato skin. Interesting. But yes, you need to peel things. Sometimes the outer part of a vegetable is not as yummy, and so you peel it and you eat the inside. And of course, the basic verb wash. Sometimes you need to wash things before you eat them, especially fresh vegetables. If you're going to eat something that's fresh or uncooked, you will often wash it before you eat it. We wash our lettuce, we wash our celery, we even wash our carrots before we eat them. It's just sometimes a good idea. There might be a little bit of dirt on the vegetable. We definitely wash our mushrooms. I don't have a picture of a mushroom. Mushrooms will often have some dirt on them, so it's always a good idea to wash them. And rinse is very similar to wash. When you rinse something, though, you definitely are not using soap. When you wash vegetables, you don't use soap either, but the word wash in English can mean that you're using just water or water and soap. In this case, it's just water. But if you use the word rinse, it means just water. If I rinse something off, if I rinse the tomatoes, I'm not using any kind of soap. I'm just using water to make them cleaner, to maybe remove a little bit of dirt or other things that are on it. Now here we've jumped all the way to the end of making a meal and we now have to scrub something. So scrub is when you wash something, but you use a sponge or a brush, and it has an element of being difficult. Like you really have to push hard when you scrub something. When you have a brand new frying pan, when you clean it or wash it, everything, it just goes really easy. But when you have an old pan, sometimes you have to scrub it to get it clean. When you scrub something, you use a brush or a sponge to vigorously wash it. And then, of course, we have cook. Let me go over these for a sec. We have cook, we have bake, we have fry, and we have boil. And I will go back to those. When you cook something, this is just the general word for making food. Usually also when you're using a stove or oven. Like I'm going to cook something. I'm going to cook some supper tonight. What are you having for lunch? Just sandwiches, or are you going to cook something? When you bake something, though, it usually goes in the oven. You bake bread, you bake a pie. Not meat, though. Generally, when you put meat in the oven, you are roasting it. Or we might even say just cooking it. I'm going to cook a chicken. But when you make a pie or cookies or bread, and you put it in the oven, we use the verb to bake. And then fry is when you use a frying pan, which is a shallow pan. So you fry an egg, you can fry bacon, you can fry some sausages. Whenever you use a frying pan, we use fry. And then boil is simply to bring water to a high temperature so that it starts to bubble. It starts to boil. So when you have water boiling, there are little bubbles coming out of it. When you have something like soup or stew where it's on the stove and there's just little bubbles coming out, you've just brought it to a boil. And when you let it sit at that temperature for a while, we say that you are simmering the soup. So often it will say, bring the water to a boil, add all the ingredients, and then let simmer for 25 minutes or let simmer for 30 minutes. Simmer is just boiling very, very gently for a period of time. And you will often simmer things like soup. Like I can see this big pan at the far end. He's probably decided to let the soup simmer for a while. So just a light boil. Some of you might steam your food. Jen and I have a device called a steamer, and we will often use our food steamer to steam broccoli. We'll steam different kinds of vegetables with it. Sometimes we'll use it to steam rice. Sometimes we'll use it to steam corn, like in this picture. But it basically, the bottom has water in it, and the water boils, and then steam goes through the food. It's a yummy and easy way to cook food. I think this is an interesting one. So listen closely. You use a toaster to make toast. When you have bread and you want toast, you need to toast the bread. So there's the verb. So in the kitchen, I will often grab 2 slices of bread and then I will toast them. I will put them in the toaster, push the toaster down. When it pops up, I will have toast. So the action of converting bread into toast is the verb to toast. I'm going to toast some bread later today, and I'll probably have an egg sandwich. Now, with this one, you might think to yourself, Bob, this is a lesson about verbs. Why do you have the word microwave with the picture of a microwave? Well, this is also a verb. In English, you can microwave your food. You can say, I'm going to microwave this slice of pizza because it's cold. I'm going to microwave this plate of food. Sometimes when I come home from work, it's late and Jen and the kids have already eaten. And then I will microwave the plate of food that Jen has made for me. I will put it in the microwave and go beep, 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 beep. There's your sound effects for today, and hit start. So microwave can be used to talk about the thing as well as it is also a verb. You can microwave something. So a very simple verb, mix. Sometimes you need to mix the ingredients. If I was to make cookies or muffins or pancakes, I would put the ingredients in a bowl and then I would mix them. You might need to mix by hand. This person is mixing by hand, but you can also mix using an appliance called a mixer, which has 2 beaters that spin really fast and it goes bzzz. So when you put ingredients together in a bowl, sometimes you need to mix them. And the difference between mix and stir is usually something you do quickly, sometimes while you're cooking. So they're kind of interchangeable, but here's some good examples. If I was making something, I would mix the ingredients together. If I was frying something, I would stir the things in the pan. Another good example, when I put sugar in my coffee, I stir my coffee. So there is a slight difference between the two. They do have slightly different usages, but both of them mean to combine ingredients together. Add. So I added this one.